Home affordability has taken a beating, and there's evidence that it's going to get worse very soon. The first stage of falling home affordability began 3 years ago, as a drop in the number of homes for sale led to bidding wars and skyrocketing home prices. Declining inventory in the for sale market has become the norm, and now we're seeing the same in the for rent market too. As prices and rents move higher, people must spend more of their cash reserves and more of their disposable income on housing. This has been ongoing for 3 years, but let me tell you how it's going to get worse. The second stage of falling home affordability began in January as mortgage interest rates jumped up from the low 3% level to what is now approaching the mid 5% range. When one looks at interest rates over the past 50 years, today's rates are still far below average, but today's buyers are now paying a higher rate than previous buyers going back to 2009 and double the rate charged just 17 months ago. Today's video is going to put these two stages in context to help you understand why home affordability is plummeting and where the market is going to go from here. For those of you who remember the housing bubble from 15 years ago, this is not that. Here's a simple thought. If you have cash, you can spend it on a home. But if your cash reserves require you to use a mortgage to buy a home, then you not only spend money on a home, but you also spend money on borrowing money. As mortgage interest rates change, the amount of money that you spend to borrow money changes, and we see this difference in the monthly mortgage payment. When mortgage interest rates rise, like they've done lately, you might think that it makes your mortgage payment higher, but that typically is not the case, and I'll explain this in a moment. Follow along as we explore where mortgage interest rates have been, where they are now, and how home affordability is being eradicated during the current change cycle in the real estate market. You can learn a lot from studying a 50-year history of mortgage interest rates. The blue bars in this graph plot the average monthly 30-year fixed mortgage interest rate since the beginning of 1971. The solid yellow line plots the 50-year average rate, and you can see that roughly 1/2 of the months were above that line and 1/2 of the months were below that line. Perhaps the most intriguing trend is plotted as an orange dashed line, showing how since 1980, rates generally declined until hitting a market low in December of 2020. Let me tell you what this means and why we're now facing a multi-generational change in the housing market. Anybody who purchased a home in the late 1970s or later, all the way through the recent years, generally found lower mortgage interest rates when it was time to sell their home and buy another. If they applied their equity from the sale of their home to the subsequent purchase of the next one, the lower rates allowed them to move up to a better home while keeping their monthly mortgage obligation pretty close to where their last payment had been. For 50 years, move-up buyers have been supported by falling mortgage interest rates, but I fear that those days are over. Interest rates are cyclical, and there's plenty of reason to believe that we're now heading into an era of generally rising mortgage interest rates. When you consider that roughly 40% of the housing market is buyers who currently own homes, then you quickly realize how declining mortgage interest rates have been a major contributing factor to the number of homes sold annually. If you take away declining rates, how much of the move-up buyer pool goes away? Rising mortgage interest rates mean that while move-up buyers will have the equity from the sale of their homes, they might be priced out of buying a nicer home because the cost of the home, and more importantly, the rising cost of money, will price them out of the move. I explained this in detail in a recent video about how home ownership is radically different for millennials. And by the way, if you're not a subscriber and missed that video, please consider clicking the thumbs up like button and subscribing now so that you get all my new content when it is fresh. I work very hard to deliver data and facts, not the clickbait hype you get from many real estate market videos. The past 10 years have seen rates fluctuate from as high as 5% to well below 3% during COVID. This graph plots the monthly average 30-year fixed rate for the past 8 years through March of 2022. But the red star shows today's rate. For many younger people, this graph of the past 8 years represents normal mortgage market conditions. But as we know from the prior graph, it's actually a picture of the best of times. I broke out the final 8 years for several reasons. First, to illustrate just how high the current 30-year fixed rate is today when compared to recent low rates. Second, to underscore a recency bias that I see in many real estate reports and videos that talk about rates coming back down to normal. Today's rate is below normal. I'm the first to admit that I'd go broke trying to forecast mortgage interest rates, but history is very clear that these rates will not continue forever, and even that red star on the graph represents a huge discount from the average rate since 1971. It is my belief that rates will go higher, and they will do so for an extended period of time, though I do expect fluctuations along the way. When mortgage interest rates rise, home affordability declines for the majority of homebuyers who finance their purchases. As rates rise, the amount of money a buyer can borrow declines. Thus, the buyer must either lower his expectations on what he can afford or bring more cash to the closing table, which is often prohibitive for many buyers. The top left table shows that a buyer borrowing $400,000 at today's rate of 5.4% for a 30-year fixed-rate loan can expect a principal and interest payment of $2,246 each month. As rates rise, so too would the payment for the same $400,000 loan. In fact, were rates to reach the 50-year average, that monthly principal and interest payment would be 28% higher. In reality, though, as rates rise, it rarely impacts most buyers' payments. Rather, it impacts the amount of money they can borrow and how much home they can afford. Buyers have a tendency to max out the home purchase price based upon what the bank will allow them to borrow. Thus, rising rates don't impact their payments as much as it impacts the price of the home that they buy. As mortgage interest rates rise, the amount of money a buyer can borrow, and thus how much home they can afford, declines greatly. The upper right table shows the same buyer from before who borrowed $400,000 at a payment of $2,246 per month. Instead of increasing the payment as we did before, this table shows the reduced loan amount this buyer can afford due to changing mortgage interest rates. Here's something you should consider when looking at this table. Even as the buyer sees his borrowing power decline, home prices are rising. This is a double whammy against home affordability, as the buyer has to lower his expectations significantly. Oh, to have the power of hindsight. Mortgage interest rates hit a lifetime bottom of 2.68% back in December of 2020, so those that purchased near that time borrowed money at phenomenal rates. Today's rate is just over double that low of 17 months ago, meaning today's borrowers are paying twice as much for the right to borrow money as were those buyers who took advantage of low rates in December of 2020. The bottom table provides great insight into what rising rates mean today versus the market low. Somebody who could have qualified for a $400,000 loan back then would have had a mortgage payment of $1,618 per month. That same payment would only qualify for $288,000 on a loan today, a decline of 28%. But that doesn't tell the whole story. Let's consider a real-world example. Assuming a 10% down payment, that $400,000 borrower in December of 2020 was buying a $444,000 home with just $40,000 out of pocket. Today, that same home would likely sell for $520,000, meaning today's buyer who can afford a $1,618 principal and interest per month payment would need $232,000 out of pocket to keep the payment the same. Somebody who chose to wait just 17 months saw their out-of-pocket cash requirements move 480% higher. The buyer who took advantage of the low rates 17 months ago now has more than $120,000 equity and that nice low payment of $1,618 per month. Now, I know that's a lot of numbers to take in, so I've come up with a real-world example of what it would mean for this buyer. This picture clearly depicts the penalty for waiting when home prices and mortgage interest rates are both rising. I've chosen these homes because they are appropriately priced to demonstrate our example of a buyer who could have bought a $444,000 home in December of 2020, but chose to wait until now and can only qualify for about $320,000. The top home is what his $1,618 monthly mortgage payment would have purchased back in December of 2020, while the bottom home is what that same $1,618 monthly mortgage payment will get him today. It's a huge difference in the quality of the home for the same monthly mortgage payment. The final graph in today's video plots home affordability in Tallahassee with an adjustment for inflation. We adjust for inflation to uncover the real growth or decline in home affordability by comparing all years in constant money terms. In our case, we're adjusting all prices to $1991. For those readers not in Tallahassee, I can tell you this graph very likely mirrors what you would find in your market too, just the absolute values might be higher or lower. Focus on the trends of the values. They're most likely similar to what you'll find in your market. In this graph, the blue bars plot the average home price adjusted to $1991 and are measured on the left vertical axis, while the red line plots the average monthly mortgage principal and interest payment adjusted to $1991 and measured on the right vertical axis. Note that the horizontal axis runs from 1991 through 2040, allowing me to use current information and a few conservative assumptions to forecast the future for home affordability. The table on the left side of the graph shows my assumptions for both mortgage interest rates and appreciation rates in the future. This is an updated graph I published last year, and I had to adjust my assumptions for 2021 and 2022 because they were too conservative. I mention this fact because I'm not trying to scare anybody. The facts are the facts, and the future for home affordability is not good. The cross-dashed line shows where we are today. Note how the red line, showing home affordability, has surged at its fastest rate ever to start this year. The horizontal dashed line shows how today's adjusted mortgage payment is now higher, meaning less affordable, than all previous years with the exception of 2004 through 2008. Yet look how I project it moving forward. Remember, all values in this graph are adjusted to $1991, so a buyer today is getting a better buy than a buyer in 2005, but worse than any buyer in the 1990s. Unfortunately, I project monthly mortgage payments will reach a new all-time high before the end of 2023, and home affordability will continue to erode from there. Home prices and mortgage interest rates are the two primary drivers of this forecast. I do not see anything in the near future that would bring down home prices. Sure, it could happen in some local markets that are undergoing population declines, but the overall U.S. population is still growing, and we've been underbuilding America long enough to have dug a rather deep hole. The minimum wage in many states has risen faster than the historic norm, and we've seen construction costs rise faster than normal, and that's not even including the soaring prices due to COVID. Homes are not being built fast enough to fill the void in inventory, thus bidding wars are driving home prices higher at alarming rates. Home prices are subject to supply and demand and will likely look at a supply imbalance for at least the next 3 to 5 years. Mortgage interest rates could be manipulated lower than my forecast, though it's not likely with inflation now running higher than the Fed would like to see. I think my forecast for rising rates is very conservative, growing at just 0.25% each year. Imagine this graph if rates were to reach 10% over the next few years. Remember, rates have doubled in the past 17 months. It's not crazy to think rates could double again over the next 5 years. Here's my advice regarding home affordability. Though mortgage interest rates today are much higher than we've seen in recent years, they are much lower than what we've observed prior to 2012. Since you cannot go back in time, my recommendation is that you make a decision today on how to proceed forward. If you own a home that you enjoy and that you can see yourself happy in for the next 10 years or more, you really don't need to do a thing. You might consider a refi or a HELOC to take advantage of today's relatively low mortgage interest rates, but otherwise, you're good to go on housing. But if you believe that your home won't be your best solution within the next few years, you'll be better off financially if you make the change today. Homes are cheaper today than they will be tomorrow, and you'll likely borrow money at a lower rate today too. Even if you have to bite off more than you'd like to chew for the short run, the investment and discipline you apply today will be well rewarded in the future. Now, if you've been thinking about moving, but you're worried you'll sell your home and not be able to find a replacement, you'll be excited to hear about a new program that we have launched. We call it our stress-free move, and it allows you to get your home sold with a provision you can stay until you find the replacement. If you never find the right replacement home, you don't have to move at all. Ask us about our stress-free move. It could be the perfect opportunity for you in today's low inventory market. If you want to see more videos about current housing market conditions, I've assembled a great playlist that you can view by clicking on the box on the top left corner of your screen. To see a popular video featuring my top 6 home selling tips, just click on the box below it. Please remember to like this video, check out the links below it, and subscribe to our channel so that you never miss anything.